I call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And I'm just recalling actually the passage of the original Animal Welfare Bill in the late 90s, where my colleague Pete Hodson took over from me, and I was the usual member of the Primary Production Select Committee then, as I was now, and he, though, had, as a vet, had particular passion and skills in the area of animal welfare, and so he took over and did a lot of the negotiating for Labour, and the same now we have my colleague Mr Mallard, who's spokesman for animal welfare, but I remain that of primary industries, and it's a healthy balance. He likes the poodles, I like the big dogs. And I think it's the fact that I guess there's a different approach to it. And as a farmer and as a representative of the primary sectors, I guess keeping some reality in this debate is really important. And I think generally Parliament has done a good job. I acknowledge the Minister. He's had at a very late stage, a flash of brilliance or wisdom, and has introduced an SOP, which I think addresses things that my colleague Mr Mallard has been asking for, and indeed Mojo Mathers, for some time. And the government is slow to learn, but it does learn, and I have to acknowledge that. Mr Speaker, as Trevor Mallard said, our international reputation relies on our ability to care for animals properly. And the finer points, there are many who want to eat meat but don't want to slaughter animals. And that's the reality and the conundrum that faces many consumers, I guess, that they want to be the beneficiaries of a really good, safe food system, and including a good animal welfare. Indeed, that's what they expect. At the end of the day, there are some realities, some harsh realities, of course, around the slaughter of animals for consumption that we have to continue to allow. And be that hens, be it the production of pork or beef. We've just got to make sure that we keep the right balance. Indeed, the issue of exemptions and the time frame to allow those to be phased out is a very important issue. We acknowledge that there are practices that we've now accepted are unacceptable, if you'd like to include that contradiction, I guess. And so we want to phase them out over time. Take sow stalls, for example, introduced to protect the piglets, of course, so they wouldn't get squashed. And there's a harsh reality of pig farming that many of those pigs, those young piglets, do get squashed in an uncontrolled environment. However, 50% of the pork in this country comes from production systems that don't use sow stalls. So we need time to ensure that the rest of the pork industry can transition to the phase-out of those sow stalls. And indeed, that was an agreement early on. NAWAC has accepted that. There were recommendations. And we say that although the government has extended it, that there should have been a commitment to that phase-out period, which is 2015, I think, originally. But nonetheless, the government has eased off on some of those things, and with that easing off is the risk to our international reputation. We've moved in the area of export of live animals to ban until we get robust or absolute guarantees of the safety of those animals. And some ask, of course, the treatment of them beyond or into the export market that we send them. Mr Speaker, consumers are ultimately the people who will drive this. There are ethical obligations for us, of course, as humans to look after animals. But as a country dependent upon the production of food, we have to make sure that we meet consumers' expectations. And I have before me here a report, just a recent report from Lincoln University that was investigating, I guess, maximising export returns and consumer behaviours and trends. And in China, India, UK, all of our export markets, all those consumers basically said they would pay more for product that came from systems that had robust animal welfare systems in them or regimes. And they've actually quantified it, Mr Speaker. For example, in Sweden and Denmark, a 4% premium could be obtained for beef products in where there were good animal welfare standards, 32 to 96% for pork, and 36 to 112% for chicken. more for outdoor housing access. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, sorry. There are many now scientific and well-researched figures that back up the value for New Zealand of having the very best animal welfare system in place. There is a concern, and my colleague referred to it, is how we oversee this. And the Minister is in charge of a government department called the Ministry for Primary Industries. It is a big organisation. It's charged with forestry, with fishing, with farming, horticulture, with biosecurity, with food safety, and indeed with animal welfare. It's Labor's view, Mr. Speaker, that is too broad a range of responsibilities, and I think we've seen the MPI fail and the Minister in his oversight fail in the area of biosecurity and indeed in food safety. We hope that it doesn't fail too much in animal welfare, Mr. Speaker, because all those three crucial areas must be maintained in terms of the standards, the regulations upheld, and our reputation integral to our ongoing export of food from the country. Mr. Speaker, I think there are some real risks because of the structure of MPI and the Minister's oversight and the fact that the government hasn't funded them properly. So in the passage of this bill and the implementation of better standards and more up-to-date standards, I hope that we can ensure that these standards can be policed properly. And in fact, out in the domestic area and in farming areas, the ministry is relying on the SPCA, in fact, to go out, to monitor, to alert, and sometimes to enforce these regulations. And I don't think that's necessarily good enough, Mr. Speaker, for an organisation that relies to a large extent on voluntary funding. Mr. Speaker, we will in Labor support the passage of this legislation, but there will be issues we raise along the way. One of the things put forward, of course, is that if we have a very robust, sound animal welfare regime in this country, then we should be proud of it and indeed market it and get some value as identified in this report from the marketplace. But this government refuses to accept country of origin labelling for products produced in this country. And it is head in the sand stuff for the Minister to advocate for the best production systems, but not to acknowledge that and promote that in a way that delivers to the farmers, to the pork producers, the chicken producers, a benefit from it themselves. So what I say to the Minister is that he should perhaps follow through with this more robust animal welfare regime and ensure country of origin labelling to meet the requirements across the Tasman in Australia, and we normally have trans-Tasman food regulations, that would say to the farmers of whatever, beef or pork or chicken, that if you have abided by this new set of regulations and the passage of the legislation, then you deserve to have a premium for your product. And that's where this government is failing the producers in New Zealand. They will impose upon them, through the passage of this legislation, often additional costs, and we believe collectively as a parliament that they are necessary to uphold our reputation. But to then not offer those same producers a benefit to offset that cost is, in our view, irresponsible. And the government has played, I think, an odd role in taking hands-off approach to country of origin labelling when they've had hands-on to all these other necessary areas in food production. Mr. Speaker, can I just say that there are a number of issues for the farming sector that need to be considered. They won't be addressed directly in this legislation, things such as the housing or the pastoral production of beef and milk across the country, and there's increasing scrutiny of systems within New Zealand of how we're producing our milk and beef, and if we're going to actually get, as I say, a premium from pastoral production. We've got people now putting a lot of dairy production in housing, part housing, in fact some of them full-time housing of cows. So the question of whether that then does put us at risk is something that I think the Ministry has to look at. Mr Speaker, very briefly, NAWAC, the National Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, is a good organisation, Mr Chairman.
Call Richard Prosser.
Chair, I'm pleased to rise on behalf of New Zealand First to take a call on this Committee of the Whole House as we debate